Hey everybody, John Ray with Musing Wizard once again here with Carl, Wizard in Training. We're going to try to upgrade him to full wizard status today, and really we wanted to continue the conversation that we had had about dun 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 religion and all of the baggage that comes along with that. And I think where we had left off in our conversation last time was really starting to dive into the difference between religion and spirituality. You hear a lot of times somebody will say, "Oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual." So what does that mean? We're going to unpack that a little bit. We're going to really try to drive into maybe the valuable Easter eggs that live in both of those things and how you can apply those to your life to maximize and find that optimal timeline. So Carl, thanks for being here, and let's dive in.
John, thanks for having me. Always an absolute pleasure. And yeah, had a lot of fun the last time we spoke. Religion, funnily enough, I don't know how we didn't manage this, but we didn't cover the whole topic in an hour. It surprises
Wild
me
that we couldn't get through it all.
But yeah, what a place to pick up the conversation again. We spoke about our definitions of God last time. We spoke about AA and Christianity and a few of these I guess, stories that have been told for a long time in our evolution as a species, and the nuggets that we can glean from these texts, regardless of whether or not we are a Christian or Islam or Buddhist or Taoist, there is still some nuggets of gold should you be willing to seek them and to take them on, which I love a lot about everything. You can learn from everyone or everything. So yeah, that conflict between spirituality and religion, we touched on it last week, and I thought that'd be a really good place to start this week. You mentioned that some people say, yeah, I'm not religious. Some like they almost like put their nose up at religion. Hence, an obvious detour to no, but I'm spiritual. So tell me why that doesn't quite land for you, or what maybe opportunities do you see in a statement like that?
The reason that it doesn't quite land for me, because I actually used to say that, so I'm allowed to raise my hand and roll my eyes against it now. Is that it's really kind of like a judgment, right? When you say that there is these bucketing of these two different things, and of course we use language, like all language is a bucket, but oftentimes it's said in a kind of disdain towards religion. And so in many ways it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because to think that there's millions and, in most of these billions of people that are finding some kind of a meaningful experience in religion, and to just throw all of that out and say, oh, those people are all dumb or stupid, or they don't actually understand what's going on. Like anytime a thought form gravitates and attracts that many people, there's something in there that's calling them in. And so it's worth a kind of exploration. And so, I think oftentimes when people are gravitating towards, oh, I'm a spiritual person, not a religious person, really what they're trying to do is separate any judgment that might be projected onto them if they were to say they were a religious person. And so in some ways it's coming from a fear. And so you're creating kind of a label construct so that someone doesn't misidentify you, because if that happened, then maybe they would think something that you don't want them to think about you. And so it's all birthed out of an underlying emotional fear that you're going to be misunderstood. And we all have that. I've had that in many ways. And it's one of the main things emotionally that we have to work through if we're going to continue to evolve and upgrade. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so I'm constantly aware that I'm projecting onto others what I think they're projecting onto me. And in many ways, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual is a casing or an exoskeleton that we wear so those people don't have an opportunity to project onto us for what we believe. So I guess that's kind of how I would interpret and unpack that, and curious to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I am also a recovering people pleaser. That actually might be the thing that I go to AA for. I was looking for a reason, other than my phone and all these other things that I don't want to admit publicly. But yeah, that's a very interesting take. The fear of judgment definitely governs so much of our behavior. and a lot of the time unconsciously, and one of our protective layers, the layer to protect the child, is to people please for a lot of us, and is for me, was for me. I will be okay, and no one will hurt me if I just make everyone happy about me at my expense. Well, guess what? Now I'm hurting me, and that's not a very optimal game, as we've spoken about a few times. But yeah, I guess religion, as we spoke about in the last call, for me, and I'm sure so many people, gets put in a box from a young age, and some of us subscribe to it from a young age, and some of us are repelled from it by a young age. And I guess it is perhaps that definition that we hold on to, that we want to separate ourselves from. So it could be largely due to the judgment that we are fearful of receiving, or just the definition in which we have for religion, that we're just like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, but I do
Well,
believe in something greater.
it's kind of like the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. So for religion, the cover is, who have you met from that religion before, and did you have a good experience with them? And so if your only experience with Christianity was bigoted people that are yelling mean things or protesting something that you were taking part of, then it's easy to label the entire religion based on that experience. And we do this with everything. It's part of recognizing our own biases and working through the emotions behind that, so that we open up that decision space and can see more of the picture that's there, which allows us to plumb for the gold that is in all things. And of course, even something that historically has only netted negative outcomes, we can always be the anomaly in these things and find the trail of gold that exists in all things. And by putting our attention on things, we can be so processed in our own feelings that our attention, the light of our consciousness on something that historically has been labeled as a negative thing, can upgrade it. It can bring forth the manifestation or the transformation of that thing. And that's part of being a spiritual alchemist. And so we kind of need to maybe define what is spiritual. So if somebody's not religious but they're spiritual, what the heck are they even talking about? And I think for most people, what they're talking about is kind of like an agnostic perspective, where they're like, I don't really know if there's a God, but I'm open to there being one. And I know when I'm scared, I pray to something, but I don't really know what it is. So something deep inside of me thinks that there's power in that. Otherwise, I wouldn't go immediately to that place when I'm in terror. Because that's usually when people decide to prayer, is it like go to prayer, it's like a last ditch option. And so they have no other place to turn, and so they have to turn to something beyond themselves. And I think that's what spiritual kind of means for me as well. It's a recognition that there's something larger than me that I'm both in concert with but also relationship with. And we sometimes call that God, we sometimes call that a higher ideal, but it's that recognition that I can have some kind of a communication or an interaction or a reception of information that is beyond me. You hear it called the unified field, this idea that all we live in kind of a simulated consciousness experience, and all information is available. It's just a matter of tuning your radio wave to it. Well, the radio wave is something that we can't see. We're swimming in a sea of Wi-Fi and radio waves right now, but we don't have the tuners to be able to pick it up in our body. So we have to use devices to get into those things. Spirituality for me is being able to tap into some of those unseen data streams and tune ourselves to it deliberately. And I think my exploration of spirituality is in understanding that there are information sets available to each of us. And maybe we interpret that as angels or aliens or spaceships. Everybody is going to have their own interpretation based on their upbringing, based on the science fiction that they've read. We're all interpreting those packets of information that the simulation is blasting at us in different ways. But the underlying truth of those things, I think, point to a lot of commonalities. And so when somebody says, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, I think probably what they're saying is I don't need to label it as much as a religion has labeled it, and I recognize that all things are fingers pointing to the moon.
Yes, it's that conscious distinction between like you said, the perception of what religion is based on every experience that someone's been through up to this point, and then also the perception of what one believes spirituality to be. And I guess like we spoke about God, and one definition of God could be the sum of all ideals, you know. And I guess spirituality in a sense is a recognition, whether it's agnostic and I don't know and I'm not sure, or it's, yeah, I feel like there's a greater thing that connects us, a greater power in me, a higher self, etc. These all could be synonyms for God, but our definition of God tries to so we try to remove ourselves from that based on those experiences. You mentioned that you used to be a guy that said, "Hey, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual." And I don't know if I've said those exact words, but I've definitely thought them, you know. Uh, for you're someone I look up to, John, and I'm sure your definition of religion has changed as you've gotten older. How would you define religion now?
Yeah, to me, religion is just like a rule set, right? Like it's an algorithm. It's a way of perceiving, and the value in religion is the value in having a system. When you have a system, there's so much energy waste when you're just winging it. So I'm somebody who likes to wing it. I like to shoot from the hip, but there's a ton of waste in that. There's also some benefits, but when you're not following a system that is proven to work, there's just going to be natural inefficiencies in that. And so when you are somebody who has a lot going on, you've got a family, you're a CEO, you're running these large organizations, you may not have the time to you know deeply contemplate the philosophies of the universe, and yet you still recognize that there's an importance in tapping into that data set, even if you call it something different. And so I think religion is a rule set of people who have thought deeply about these things. They have received something in a way that is classified as divine or extrasensory, and they have compiled that into a set of rules, which is just a system, right? It's just an algorithm, it's just a way of living that is optimal. And they've said if you live this way, it will be net optimal results. And so then I think people, they test out that hypothesis, they test out that rule set. It works for them because of course it's a good system. Like it may not be the most optimal system, but it's still a system that has been time tested. And if you follow the system, you will likely have positive results. If you can go all in on the system, what happens with a lot of people is their curiosity gets the best of them, and that's not a bad thing, but they then have to develop their own system because the itch is too great to just be pigeonholed into one system. And that's totally fine. Like there's plenty of value in following somebody else's system. If you've ever tried to get into shape, like it's kind of good to have a system if you don't know what you're doing. But in many ways, that's like training wheels. And at some point, you might want to really get into the depths of what is right for you. Like, if you're truly thinking about optimizing to the DNA of your spirit, then there's going to be a deeper level of sensitivity that your system is going to have to adjust to. And I think that certain systems like Christianity or Buddhism can evolve with you. They're giving you a framework that has been specifically designed to evolve with you. And yet, there's value in thinking beyond the system, if nothing else, to strengthen your belief in it, to strengthen your knowledge of it. I've recently returned to Christianity, after being raised in it, and I've always been interested in it because that's where my roots were. but returning to it, having now felt through all of the judgment that I had about the negative experience I had in Christianity, um, I'm able to take all of the other stuff that I've read from all of these other philosophies, and now I see, oh, I have a much deeper interpretation of the narratives that are happening in the Bible. They're much more impactful for me. They're much more meaningful. And so by going astray, by being the prodigal son that went and made all the mistakes and then returning, of course the father is still welcoming, and in that welcoming there's a feast, because all of that life experience makes me love the ideal more. And that's been my experience with Christianity, and I have a interpretation that probably a lot of Christians wouldn't necessarily agree with, but that's fine. Like, everyone should be able to have their own experience with any text, and be able to put it to use in whatever way they want. And I am someone who absolutely loves diving into time-tested systems and looking for where the breaking points are, and then taking the things that work for me and discarding the things that don't work, and cobbling it all together and into my own system that I can follow, that allows me to be the most efficient spiritual being that I can be. And, in all of the things that I've studied, the efficiency has always come back to, you're going to live life, and life is going to trigger something in your nervous system. And if you can sit and process out that bioenergetic, feeling, the sensation in your body, and allow that to release back into creative potential, you will always be pointed in the most optimal direction. And that's the efficiency that I've found from studying all of these things that I think they're all pointing to. But that seems so simple that you might have to go through the entire rabbit hole of those systems to recognize how powerful it actually is.
I think we often find that most things are simple, not easy, but simple. I like how you mentioned that you went away, you made some mistakes, you lived some life, and you've come back to a system, and now suddenly things have deeper meaning, or you see them in a different light, or you're able to resonate with different pieces of the text. And it just reminds me of that quote, no man steps in the same river twice, because the
Mm,
river's different and the man's different. And I think that's
100%.
that's quite beautiful. And just the way you sort of explained that journey for yourself, it makes sense why you're an entrepreneur. You know,
Mm,
like an entrepreneur creates their own system. They might have subscribed to a previous system. They saw the flaws. They decided to, no, you know what, I can create a better system. And maybe they'll make a ton of mistakes and go back to a previous system with a whole ton more experience and competency and foresight and critical thinking and discernment and all of these things that you get from following the path of the unknown.
mm,
And that's why I love, like I often say, you either win or you learn. That
mm.
there's no such thing as losing if you don't give up, right?
For
And
sure.
if you're not growing, you're dying. Like we've all got to be moving forward in one way or another. You spoke about this, I guess, as your experience in our willingness to adopt systems, and some of us aren't as willing as others. But tell me what you think about this. I hear you speak about religion. I hear you speak about your relationship and others' relationships with these existing systems. And it makes me think about the political systems that
Hmm.
people subscribe to. It's like, from my perspective, some people replace God with this like collective ideal that should exist. And then suddenly that is the thing that orients all their behavior. And it seems to me as though that might not be the thing that saves one. But
Sure.
tell me what you think about that link there between a god, the system, a people's almost like visceral attraction to adopting a set of principles and path.
Yeah, it's probably a good transition into some of the premises of reality transurfing. So in reality transurfing, there's a concept called pendulums, and basically pendulums are when a bunch of people have thoughts about something, and those thoughts are all congruent in frequency, and so it creates this energy structure that's just spinning and spinning and spinning, and the energy structure almost takes on a life of its own, and at a physics level its sole purpose is to consume more energy, to bring more people into the pendulum. And so politics would be an example of a pendulum where it's a certain ideology that people subscribe to, and the more people that subscribe to it, the faster the pendulum is spinning. And the pendulum is an energy construct that if you are not consciously aware of how you're spending your own energy, it will decide for you. It will be the conscious choice. And so it will take unconscious people and it will put them into motion in service of the pendulum. And so, sometimes you hear this called like a demagogue, or like a spiritual overcloaking, or some people call it a god. But really it's an energy construct. And if we were going to look at it at a spiritual physics level, it's just basically people that don't have conscious control over their impulses. Because when we're actively avoiding things in our nervous system, when we're actively avoiding past trauma, that becomes an unconscious thing that pendulums can draw at. Because that becomes an area of our energy that we're unconscious to. So if you have more than 51% of your energy field that has been compartmentalized because you're refusing to feel it, you're going to start to have physical manifestations like being an aloof person, like forgetting things. Like in latter stages of life, it can show up as dementia. This is you actively shutting down your own energy flow because it's too uncomfortable to have to look at what's in that area of the field. And so then that 60% of your energy that's been compartmentalized can now easily be manipulated by the energy structure of pendulums. And so these are people that get onto political bandwagons, and they're not thinking about the future. They're thinking about, how do we destroy everyone that is against us? And that's how pendulums tend to operate. And so anything that has a lot of thought energy going towards it starts to spin as a pendulum. And because there is energy in it, it's an energy structure. People in unconscious ways, and sometimes in conscious ways, will start to worship the pendulum. But the pendulum is not an entity. The pendulum is kind of like a mini collective consciousness of ideas that's just spinning energy and allowing you to use something. And if you're trapped in a pendulum in an idea system and you go against that system, it will absolutely destroy you. And this is why people are afraid of aligning themselves with religious ideas, because religions are pendulums. And there's a very real sense that if I get into this too deep and then I decide I don't want to be in here, the people in this are going to attack me. And you see that when you try to leave a religion all the time, because religions in many ways operate from a similar construct of a cult. And so it's all just collective thought form, collective agreement, and that forms this energy structure called a pendulum. And then there's two ways that you can engage with it, three ways that you can engage with a pendulum. You can be a part of the system, and so that's a cog in the machine of the pendulum. You can decide to be the hero of the pendulum, so you understand what the ideals and motives of the pendulum are, and you perfectly position yourself to be elevated to the top of that pendulum. And so that's the way that a pendulum could actually help you. If you're aligned with the goals of a pendulum, that would be like a Trump-like figure who has figured out how to take the dissenting energy of a pendulum and rise to the top of it. So politicians do this all the time. And then the third way is to recognize that you can disconnect from the pendulum at any time, and that the pendulum is not nearly as important as the people inside of it are making it. And once you disconnect, the pendulum has no effect on your life, and you will recognize that you can thrive without the constructs or impulses that the pendulum is inspiring within. And so to get back to your question, like I think that many people are engaging with pendulums unconsciously, and the sheer energy force of the pendulum plays out on their unconscious nervous system, and then that gets projected forward as sometimes bad behavior, oftentimes bad behavior, but certainly unconscious behavior. And the unconscious behavior is being guided by the energy flow of the pendulum.
I love how you articulated the relationship between stored energy and unconsciousness,
Mm.
which makes a lot of sense, right? If there's stored trauma that you are running away from or repressing or not feeling, then of course that pushes you or one to be unconscious, which allows these pendulums to take advantage. And I think one pendulum that every single person listening to this could relate to is the pendulum that you escape or that you try to disconnect from as soon as you start improving yourself.
Mm.
You know,
That's
your
right.
environment wants to bring you back in. You know, your friends that you've known for years start thinking that start saying things or sharing snide comments or trying to put you down or oh you're better than us or you're doing this, you know, like it's like the what's the word, it's like the system that fights viruses. It's
Your immune system. Yeah.
thank you, it's like the
Yeah.
immune system of your environment trying to keep you like keep you safe and alive in this pendulum.
That's right,
And
because it's literally an energetic pull on your system, and all when you have a bunch of unconscious friends, they're almost wholly being influenced by pendulums, and so all of their behavior is happening at an unconscious level. They think that they're making choices, but really they're just acting impulsively based on the inputs that they're receiving from the pendulums that they're connected into, and so free will doesn't really exist for them, because in their unconsciousness they're being guided by these larger energy structures, and so their actions are the result of whatever collective thought form they're bought into, where when we disconnect from pendulums, that's where we really start to gain conscious control over our actions and our behavior, and free will maybe comes on in a larger way. It's a whole episode in and of itself, but the idea that when you are hanging out with a bunch of unconscious people and then you try to disconnect from those people, well, all of those people are being guided by an energy structure, and the sole purpose of the energy structure is to grow the energy structure. So if you're trying to remove energy from the energy structure at a physics level, it's going to have, this energetic freak out that's trying to bring you back into the system, because you leaving is a kind of entropy that it cannot allow. And so that's why it's so uncomfortable when you decide that you're going to get sober. I remember when I used to hang out with hundreds of people every single night when I go downtown and just party every single night. When I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, well, none of those people were my friends anymore, because none of us were actually friends with each other. We were friends with the pendulum. We were friends with the energetic impulses and the way that energy made us feel. And so we thought that we were addicted to alcohol and drugs, but really we were addicted to the collective impulse behavior that those things allowed us to take part in. And so when we try to disconnect from that, the pendulum is going to try to destroy you temporarily, but it's just a blip. And if you can feel through it, the way that you disconnect from a pendulum is you feel through the discomfort of that pendulum trying to pull you back in.
beautifully said. It's akin to, us evolving past our ego, orienting everything that we do. Like the first stage of conscious development is to create or to be gifted awareness, which can
Mm.
be akin to conscious incompetence, which is it's scary. And the more awareness we come across, the more we realize that we are truly incompetent in so many areas. And again, how attractive is the ego then? How attractive is that cycle of just going back and drinking with those hundreds of people every afternoon? Because this is hard, but like you said, yeah, it's a blip. It's a blip. It's that first quest in a video game, and you complete that quest, you're a bit stronger. You've got some higher skills. You've got a little bit more resources in the bank, and suddenly you're ready for the next quest. It relates beautifully. I know we haven't spoken about the hero journey in a lot of detail yet, but in every single movie or anime or story or anything portraying the hero, they're always just ready enough for the challenge in front of them. Funny that, hey, they're always just good enough to beat that bad guy
That's
every
right.
single time. And it's because that challenge presents itself to you when you're ready, just like the student finds the teacher when they're ready.
Right. And life is a game, and all games are designed to be won. And so it's impossible to have an experience that you can't overcome, because the natural, spiritual physics of reality are designed for you to be an overcomer. They like anything that's in front of you is designed to make you bigger. And once you recognize that, it's so empowering, because you recognize that the only work is to feel through the discomfort of it and then lean into the challenge.
So simple, but not easy.
That's right.
Not easy. So the pendulum. What an interesting piece of philosophy, or I guess thought. I think about almost like I don't know if this relates to reality transurfing, and we'll come back to that, I promise. But like the pendulum of consciousness, almost.
Hmm.
Like you see it as we sort of progress. I I think I hear so often that there's so many people that just are unconscious, or just not aware, or they're an NPC, an unplayable character, someone in a video
Hmm.
game that you come and just buy a loaf of bread from in the store, and then off you go, and they just stay they yeah, in the video game, NPC. Um, and again, we attract and we see what we focus on. There is also so many of us that aren't an NPC, that do take responsibility, that want to better themselves, that do seek some sort of discomfort, or whatever discomfort that they're ready for, and do their best to not fall victim to judgment, pity, loathing, etc. And again, that is just a skill and a cycle that one will continue to follow. Uh, but yeah, how do you see that maybe pendulum of consciousness, or like the bell curve of consciousness? How does that land for someone in Austin, Texas, working in crypto, a previous Google employee that is now a wizard, and how's that land for you, John?
Yeah, well, it's subject specific, right? So you can be incredibly competent in one subject and have a deep level of awareness, and be a total idiot in another subject. You see this all the time with people who are incredible entrepreneurs, but their interpersonal skills are garbage. The rest of their life is garbage. And so while they have mastery over one subject domain, they haven't figured out how to expand that mastery across all landscapes of life. And so for me, the pendulum is having an awareness that there's always going to be some subject domain that you haven't mastered yet, because reality is infinite in nature, and the video game is always going to have a next level. And so this idea that at some point you gain a level of mastery where you don't have to feel discomfort anymore is a very dangerous idea, because that's what gets us in an ego trap, and that's what makes us think I'm master of my world. And it takes us out of our curiosity, and it puts us into that dictatorship thinking, where it's a much more selfish way of viewing the world, and enacting our behavior into that world. And so for me, part of having an awareness that there's these spinning energy structures on every single topic, one is just interesting, as somebody who's building communities, because the power in community is finding mimetic ideas that are easily shareable and spreadable. And it's almost like what you're doing in marketing is building a little energy pendulum that then can get to such a degree of gravity that it just starts pulling people into it. And this is what happens when something goes viral, um, helped by technological algorithms. But pendulums in many ways are spiritual algorithms, but recognizing that those energy structures exist, and that at any moment in time, if you're not present, you could accidentally fall under the influence of one of those energy structures, which oftentimes, if you find yourself like in a manic spin, like manically trying to do something, manically trying to get somewhere, that's often because you have engaged with some thought form that's a part of an energy structure that we would call a pendulum in reality transurfing. And there's an unconscious part of you that is ready for release. And if you don't release it, you're being shown that this energy construct is going to have some kind of control over your impulses. And so the opportunity in all of those things is to be present and aware enough of what's happening in your body and willing to feel through those things so that you disconnect from those pendulums. Unless, and this is a dangerous game or can be a dangerous game to play, you decide maybe I want to use the pendulum to my favor, and that requires a certain level of mastery of really understanding how to climb a pendulum and ride the wave of that. Because just like riding an actual tidal wave, you can get absolutely pummeled because you see it in politics all the time. The pendulum will turn on you, no doubt about it. And so it's just a matter of how long can you stay on top of that bull. And when we're sitting with ourselves and we're talking about riding the bull of our energy, oftentimes what we're doing is we're disconnecting all the cords into these various pendulums that have hooked into us.
I can't help but think of Andrew Tate as you explain the journey. What's your knowledge of Tate, and what do you think of this bloke?
I mean, I have an intense knowledge of Andrew Tate. I think he's one of the most interesting people on the
It's so
planet, and
interesting.
and I think that Andrew Tate has really tapped into the hustle harder pendulum. He figured out what he calls the matrix is kind of the hustle harder pendulum, and so he figured out how to climb that pendulum. But I see what you're getting at. The pendulum is consistently trying to attack him,
The
and so
Matrix is after him.
and so he, as much as he is convincing people to exit the matrix, the more that you're focused on the matrix, the more you're caught up in the pendulum. That's the paradigm of it. And Andrew Tate had a really interesting interview with a psychologist that came to his place in Romania, and the psychologist did what a good psychologist did. He got Andrew to the place of his limits, and he was trying to get Andrew to recognize, are you able to sit still with yourself? Are you able to have still awareness? And Tate couldn't go there. Tate was aware that that was a space that he had not gone to yet. And so that psychologist did a solid for Andrew Tate because he showcased where the next upgrade was. And I have interactions with people that are in a lot of Tate's programs at a high level, and they've had interaction with him, and he's a different person when you're in private with him than the persona, as many people are, because that persona is a pendulum persona, and he's a deeply spiritual and religious person in his private life, and more of that is coming out in his public conversations. But he also recognizes how to wield the pendulum in an interesting way. He's a master at wielding pendulum energy. And so it's going to be interesting to see how or if he's able to disconnect from his pendulum and tap into that next level, which is a mastery outside of relying on that thought form energy. But he's a very interesting, hey, I'm so into contrarian thinkers. So like people get so mad at me for being into the people that I'm into. But I think Andrew Tate is one of the most interesting people alive. Elon Musk, Alex Jones, L. Ron Hubbard, like these people are
Trump.
all who
Trump.
Trump. Oh yeah, for sure.
So
Trump is one of the
interesting.
most
Yeah.
interesting people, and so I'm not tied into all of those pendulums. So if I'm part of an opposing pendulum from Trump, and somebody tells me about Trump, the pendulum is going to immediately give me this manic energy rush, and that's what people call Trump derangement syndrome. Well, that's just two pendulums going at each other. These are energy constructs, and when you remove yourself from those pendulums, you can easily view and engage with those pendulums in a conscious way where the pendulum does not have unconscious control over you. And this is that idea of being able to hold multiple ideas in your mind at the same point. You can't do that if you're too unconsciously tapped in to one of the pendulums related to that idea. But once you've cut the cords to those pendulums, you can easily analyze these things without it having an emotional impact on you.
Yeah, that chat with Tate and the psychologist, I think it's Brian. I'm not, yeah. I shouldn't have even said the name. Cut out the name, editors. That interview with Tate and the psychologist was great. The first time I've ever seen Tate have to consider in real time what he needed or was going to say, or be wordless even.
Yes.
And like I love how you put it, that he did him a solid, you know. and he did do him a solid. And I do see that hustle culture. I was in it too. The solid for me was just a very accountable leader that forced me to step back and think about my action in my
Mhm.
early career. And the second solid that the universe gave me was I hosted a podcast for a couple of years, a few years ago, and spoke to some really interesting people. And through that experience, I realized that I don't have many of my own opinions.
Mm.
And what a terrifying awareness. What a terrifying conscious incompetence. It made for being a good host, because I let the person speak freely and really move into their perspective and what they wanted to share and speak about. But I would leave and you'd get feedback from someone, or why didn't you ask this question, or what do you think about this? And I'm like, wait, I don't disagree with that either. What do I think?
Mm.
And and terrifying too. A couple of pendulums I had to disconnect from, and not consciously. It's cool to now put that, or to have a high level understanding of a pendulum and how it manifests in our reality. I think that's a very valuable concept to consider. So
Mm.
thank you. So you mentioned that this is one part of reality transurfing. What is reality transurfing?
Reality transurfing is just another system for understanding reality, and so I guess if I were going to describe what it is, it's recognizing that reality is in relationship with you, and that reality is being rendered in real time based on what's happening within you. And so in reality transurfing, there's something called the alternative space. So the alternative space is all potential things that could happen to you in any given moment. And then the alternative space is weighted by probability. So in quantum physics, we hear about probability waves, and a probability wave is just a distribution of energy and how that energy kind of breaks. And then when there's a conscious observer, that distribution of energy will center itself on one point in the distribution wave. So the alternative space is basically that distribution of all possible choices that I could make in any given moment. So I sometimes call that the decision space, and the likelihood that you're actually going to make one of those choices. So when you're involved in an energy construct like a pendulum, it's like 95% that you're going to make the choice that's in line with the pendulum. That's not actually a free will choice. You're just going off of the energy impulse because your energy systems aren't strong enough to be able to find your own frequency in that flow of energy that's coming from the pendulum. And so people who are impulsive are being almost wholly run by pendulum energy, where the alternative space is essentially a conceptual idea that we do have a kind of choice, but that choice exists only in the level of imagination. And so free will really only exists in the imagination. And in our imagination, we're basically able to take a decision, a future decision that was only at a 20% probability, and we're able to raise that to a 65% probability or to an 80% probability. And so all the visualization work, all of the finding the feeling of that future space that you want to get into, visualizing your ski run when you're an Olympic athlete and seeing yourself get that time that gives you the gold medal. These are you tuning into the alternative reality space, which is basically like a parallel reality that you're calling into your experience, and making it so that the energy impulse that comes through you in any point is aligned with the decision that is most pointed towards that optimal thing that you're going towards. And so if you don't have your own optimal ideal, sometimes we call it a holographic vision. If you're not very clear on how you want to feel and where you want to get, then whatever pendulums you're a part of have plenty of holographic visions, and your impulses will be in service to their vision rather than yours. It's why the person in the room with the largest vision is always who you're in service to. Corporate America is based on this idea. Because if you don't have a strong enough vision for yourself, guess what? You're going to become a cog in the wheel for somebody else's vision. So that's fine. There's plenty of learning opportunities in that. I've been a part of corporate America. I had a great experience. I may even go back at some point, but I would go back with different intentions than when I started out. And recognizing that in any moment in time, you're being influenced energetically to make a choice, and you think that you're choosing in that moment, but the energy construct that is ordering the probability that you're going to choose that has already happened. And so your job when you're doing the feeling work, and you're finding your own frequency, and you're developing your own vision instead of being tapped into all these pendulum visions, is that you get to order the alternative space and improve the probability that you're going to impulsively choose the things that are optimally aligned with your vision, rather than choosing the things that are aligned with the pendulums that you've connected to.
Mm. R- Recognizing reality is in relationship with me. That's one I'm looking forward to pondering more, because there is a relationship with everything. And I like how you said that the strongest vision wins, right? Like machines need cogs. There's nothing wrong with being a cog, but that being a cog isn't for all of us. And
Well, what is being a cog? It's collecting data, right? So you may not have enough data for your big vision yet.
right.
You're not 18 and then immediately, well, some people are if you invent Facebook or something. But yeah, depending on your alignment and your certainty and in your skill set, you may or may not be ready to have that big vision yet.
Exactly.
And so my girlfriend's meditation mentor calls it minnowing around. So you may have to minnow around for a little bit and figure out like what data resonates with you, like what do you even want your vision to be. And you do that just by having this noodles against the wall experience. You minnow around, and you try stuff on, and of course that's what we all recognize as the coming of age. That's what we do in our 20s, is we're just trying to figure stuff out. And so we're trying stuff on. One day we're a goth in high school, and the next day we're a prep in college, and then the next day we're a sports guy. We're trying things on, and figuring out like, where do I fit in all of this. And we can infinitely accelerate this process by feeling in each moment any discomfort that's arising in us, because that shows us where there's energy constructs that we're tied into that aren't wholly aligned with our own frequency. And reality transurfing is basically a guidebook for navigating a consciousness simulation. And so recognizing that everything is part of a subjective feedback loop, and that everything that is rendering, you had a responsibility in bringing it to be. And it's not that you took physical action that brought it into be, but if you perceive something, even if it's on the news in a country that has nothing to do with you, some part of your consciousness created that. It went into the energy structure that allowed you to manifest that. And what are we manifesting in our perception? Because it's not the whole world. That would be inefficient to render the entire world for every single person. So just like in a video game, we're only seeing the screen that's in front of us, and we're only seeing the relevant data points that we've manifested as history as they relate to this moment right now. But we're built in what we can see in that decision space. It's basically like going to a buffet. So in America, we have these huge buffets where there's 100 different types of food, and you just go around and you can shovel whatever you want onto your plate. But Abraham Hicks has a great quote where it's like, well, if you don't like lima beans and lima beans is at the buffet, are you going to spend your whole life at the buffet being like, don't eat these lima beans, they're not good? No, you're just going to move past them and put the stuff that you want on your plate, and you're going to let everybody else have their experience. And so life is a buffet, and you're constantly rendering options. So I can see something on the news and I can have zero emotional attachment to it because that's not the adventure meant for me. But I might see something on the news, and it becomes the spark, a call to adventure, where I do want to go across the world and I do want to be a part of that. So everything in our perception is just an entry point into an alternative reality that then opens and unlocks an adventure for us.
Oh, what a beautiful quote by Hicksy. It makes me think of all of the arguments about with people about coriander or cilantro in American speak. this corn and salsa has cilantro in it. Don't touch this. You're something's wrong with you if you like this. That's
Exactly. And it
hilarious.
seems
And
so ridiculous when you're doing that at a buffet over food. And yet when you do that over subject matter in
with
your day-to-day
politics, with
life,
religion,
exactly.
with work, with yes, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, mate, that was really funny. Uh, I I did want to go somewhere, so give me a minute. We spoke about the relationship with you. We then, oh yeah, our energy impulses are aligned to what we perceive as the most optimal thing. And if we don't spend any conscious energy on what we perceive as the most optimal thing, then of course we are going to subscribe to whatever pendulum has us in its grasp. And
Yes.
that's been, I guess, something over the last few years that I've really enjoyed. Like as we get closer to an ideal, it moves further away, it becomes more complex and beautiful, etc. And in this, like in many things, perfect is the enemy of great. You know,
Mm.
to try and, like, for me anyway, with purpose, I've been obsessed with purpose. What's my reason? What's my purpose? Why do I exist? What's God's plan for me, for lack of a better term? And because I still can't come up with a one sentence answer that is fucking bang and like, yes, that's how I get out of bed every day. That stopped me for a long time to consider, well, what other things are my ideals? That
Yeah.
there is always somewhere you can start in terms of, okay, if I project myself into the future, what do I want to be doing with my life? What people do I want around me? Where do I want to live? How do I want to spend my time? What do I want to feel? You can really start mapping these things out. And that's why for some people vision boards are so powerful. Manifesting is a function of that. You are consciously aligning to something, an ideal that you want to bring into your life. And just the nature of doing that, of course, your focus will be there, and therefore your ability to manifest it, should it be aligned and should it be in the plan, will come
Right.
forth.
And here's the thing about that though. When you're doing this manifesting, there's a concept in reality transurfing called I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically about importance of energy. So when we make something too important, there's a great quote from a movie called Super Troopers, and the quote is, "Desperation is a stinky cologne," and that's what happens when we make something too important. We become desperate, and our energy becomes weak and flaccid, and then we're not able to create that thing. And so in reality transurfing, we're constantly aware of how important am I making something, because if I'm making something too important, which means I'm too attached to it, I'm actually pushing it away rather than drawing it in. And so when you're creating this vision for yourself, it's important to give it as much detail as possible. And the reason for that detail is to feel how it makes you feel in your body, and then get rid of all the details and stay with the feeling. Do not make the details important. And then most importantly, move forward with anything, because it's impossible to make a mistake. Once you've aligned with the energy, you will get there, but a ship in motion is easier to turn. So it would be better to just go and get a job at the grocery store and keep moving forward, because then you're going to meet the person that slowly makes these micro turns to where you need to be. But if you just sit on your couch waiting for that vision to come in, it's so hard to put something in motion that's not already in motion. And so the key, once you've found the feeling place of that, is to recognize it's yours, it's coming in. It's like when you sign a contract on a new construction home. You sign the contract, but the home isn't built yet. But you don't worry that they're not going to build the home. You recognize, oh, in 9 months I'm going to have a home, it'll be fully built, and I'll move in. And so then you start to move forward with your life with zero worry that the home isn't going to be ready. And that's what you have to do when you're building out these constructs of what you want your future to look like. You build it to the level of detail that feels good. Once you get into detail that feels uncomfortable, you want to back off a little bit, because that means you're making those details too important, or you don't know how you're going to make those details happen. And you've made the fact that you don't know how to make those details happen too important. So you got to expand out. Abraham Hicks would call this going general. And you're really just trying to use the detail of the vision to get into the feeling space of, wow, I would feel so empowered if I had that kind of empire going, if I was helping so many people, if everything that I touched turned to gold. And so now you're just in that feeling space of being an empowered person. And then inspiration is going to come to you because the alternative space is going to open up in such a way where good choices are going to be the natural impulse. And so then you just do whatever feels interesting. And so if HEB, which is a local grocery store here, has a sign that's like, we're hiring temporary workers, and you see a cute girl there, and you're like, I don't know, I'm not doing anything else, maybe I'll go work here. Like, in that moment, that might be the most interesting thing, and maybe you quit tomorrow. Like, people get too wrapped up into ideas like loyalty, or I gotta see it through. I gotta see, if I make a choice, I gotta see it through all the way to the end. No, you see it through to the point where it feels unoptimal, and you recognize whether you're unconsciously making those choices or consciously. But when you're in a conscious place, it's okay to decide, you know what, this actually isn't for me, and then pivot towards the thing that's most interesting in that moment. But you have to be very careful, because if you're doing that from a place of unconsciousness, you'll be projecting bad behavior forward, and you'll be making those choices out of a place of fear rather than a place of knowing.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. Great move, by the way. Super Troopers is incredible, and that quote reminds me of just a concept I've spoken about in sales quite a lot through my journey, which is like clients can smell the smell of need. The smell of need is
Yes.
so obvious, and if you place importance on the outcome of this relationship, that is observed through whatever sense it's
Absolutely.
observed.
Sales is the best way to learn these principles. Because you're maybe having, 25, 30 calls a day where you're having to figure out, how important am I making this? And you really start to learn about your own energy system and your own impulses, especially when you're going back and watching your sales calls. I mean, I can remember watching early sales calls and just being terrified that that's how I was showing up, because I was completely unconscious back in those days. And now I watch a sales call, and it's, we're on a sales call right now. Like a sales call should look like this. You should be building rapport and getting into the things that are important and interesting for the person, and then being like, oh right, I'm supposed to be selling a product. Well, the conversation naturally led to this point where I can now pitch this as the perfect solution. Because when you're aligned, and when you're selling a product that you're aligned with, then you will find that on every single call, you naturally get to the space where it's so easy to just drop the product sell in.
Yeah, beautifully said. It links so perfectly to outcome independence, and then that links so beautifully to what you spoke about in terms of the describing of the vision, but then letting it go and staying with the feeling. I think that's so beautiful. That was a great way to portray that experience, and yeah, outcome independence allows you to be present, to be yourself, to build rapport, to have a laugh, to just be in flow, and not guide or limit or handicap the conversation or relationship. But if there is a clear outcome that you want from this, then like you said, you rock up differently, you behave differently. Suddenly your questions are more pointed to this end result. You don't actively listen because whatever they say, you're thinking, okay, well, this is the next thing I need to do. And then
Yes,
suddenly you're unconscious, you're living in the future.
that's right.
And it's regardless of your job as a salesperson, I've seen it time and time again. It's if your intention is to discover and put I guess, to orient the person that you're speaking to forward in the best way for them, then you can't lose.
Yeah.
Can't lose.
Yeah. And whether it's sales, whether it's relationship with your family, whether it's relationship with your friends, there's opportunities to practice deeper levels of presence and awareness. And so you get to decide, where is it going to be easiest to practice at and to try some of this on. And it's a hypothesis until you prove it to yourself. And so, with all things religion and spirituality, it's about learning how to try things on and wholly immerse yourself in something without getting lost in the pendulum of it. And when you can master that, you can become the wizard. I mean, that is what the wizard is able to do, is in the moments try on the energy structure that is most optimal without getting unconsciously attached to it. So, of course, there's way more that we can unpack on that, but that's the overarching premise. And the rule for engaging with energy structures is, you feel your own discomfort. And anything that you think you need to project onto another, no, that's your own stuff. You feel how uncomfortable it is to not be able to project that. Because the unconscious projection is just energy that's trying to express, and it's your job to gain mastery over your ability to transmute that energy back into creative potential, which is what puts you in flow and gives you the widest decision space and increases the probability of the decision that's most optimally pointed to where you want to go. And then you just get to sit in the passenger seat of your own energy structure that you created and allow life to beautifully happen.
Well, John, I think I'm ready to take the training wheels off. I might be ready to ride the bike as a wizard after this chat. Again, I know there's just so much more we could dive into regarding religion, spirituality, reality transurfing, but couldn't think of a better place to wrap this up. You know, that is again our job. Every moment is all we have, and to be present in every moment, to feel through what we're, I guess, consciously and unconsciously being presented with is where the power lies. And that's been a really great hypothesis to run for myself over the last few weeks. And I appreciate that nod, or that what word did you use for the psychologist and Tate used?
Solid.
Gift. Yes, solid. I appreciate the solid, man. I appreciate the gift. Thank you for casting a spell on me.
Yeah.
John Ray, pleasure to bloody have you, mate.
Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to do this. We'll do it again. Let us know what you want to talk about in the comments. Let us know if this got on too much of a wacky woo 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 rabbit hole. If you weren't able to follow along, let us know where you got lost, and we'll try to fill in the details next time. But I appreciate everybody for listening this long, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.